It was 1983. I was almost 5 and I'd just seen Rocky 3. Healthy dose of action, drama, and training montages for a kid that age to soak up. Now, Clubber Lang? I was legit scared of that guy, man. But he turned out to be one of my favorite movie antagonists of all time. My parents got me the Clubber Lang action figure at the now defunct Alexander's in Passaic, New Jersey. I remember he had the meanest, most terrifying mug I'd ever seen on a toy. It was awesome. What's up, toy fam and fellow collectors? This is your man TOYZee, and like many of you watching, I love toys. I'm also a collector, and this is my toy tale. I grew up in the 80s with all the awesomeness that came with it. In the early days, the only superhero in my sights was Superman, and I was hooked. I hung out with my super friends on Saturday mornings, and I had the late great Christopher Reeve as Superman on repeat. That movie introduced me to comic book superheroes in live action, a concept I find fascinating to this day. The first action figure I remember owning was Beastman from Masters of the Universe in 1982. My brother was a proud and temporary owner of He-Man. I even got a Castle Grayskull for Christmas in '86. He-Man figures, like every kid called them, were a huge part of my life back then, and that love continues strong to this day. In 1984, Kenner released Superpowers, a line of 3 3/4-inch figures of known and lesser known characters from DC Comics. On a family road trip to Florida that year, I got my very first Superman action figure. The detail, the face sculpt, incredible. I took that thing everywhere. That same year, Mattel released the Secret Wars line, Marvel's first foray into small action figures. My brother and I both got a Spider-Man figure. He got the black costume Spidey, while I got the classic red and blue. DC Comics and Marvel were now cemented in my life. Needless to say, I was having a great toy year. I dabbled in other toy lines in my youth, from Rocky to Indiana Jones to Clash of the Titans to Knight Rider to Voltron to Power Extreme, G.I. Joe, Dukes of Hazzard, Karate Kid, Power Lords, Lone Ranger, WWF. Man, I was spoiled. I even had a Michael Jackson 12-inch doll from the Beat It video. That was my jam. In June of 1989, on a hot summer day in New York City, I saw Tim Burton's Batman for the first time in theaters. 10-year-old me was floored. I jumped on that Bat bandwagon and never fell off. A small company at the time called TOYZee released a line of figures, vehicles, and play sets for the movie. Kenner also released a line of toys based on the movie, known as the Dark Knight Collection, but I wouldn't collect those for another 30 years. TOYZee released 2 or 3 different versions of movie Batman. I got chipmunk cheek bats, and I gotta tell you, it was the coolest figure ever. Even had a sweet Batcave setup with the '89 Batmobile and Batwing sitting side by side. That would become my first toy display ever. In 1990, TOYZee had 2 major lines, DC superheroes and Marvel superheroes, and they were all 12-year-old me could think about. But by the time I got to high school in the early 90s, I became less interested in action figures altogether. I boxed up my figures and put them in a closet, out of sight, out of mind. One fateful day in 2002, I walked by a newsstand filled with magazines. Remember those? And I saw what looked like a new He-Man figure on the cover of the now defunct Toy Fair magazine. I bought the mag and I couldn't believe what I saw. Coming soon, new He-Man cartoons and toys? My mission was clear. I went to my local KB Toys, rest in peace KB Toys, and bought my first He-Man figure in 15 years. It felt good. I love that figure to this day. He looks great and is a nice tribute to the original. The following week, I picked up Skeletor, and it wasn't long before I had 4 or 5 more figures duking it out on my dresser. I was collecting toys again, and I couldn't be more excited. I also did not anticipate how much my collection would grow. In the early 2000s, I started noticing Marvel figures sold in comic shops, and I thought, Marvel Legends? Why not? I picked up my first Marvel Legends figure, Series 3 Wolverine, made by good old TOYZee. TOYZee would go on to release some of the best Marvel figures at the time for the next 5 years. In late 2003, I set up a couple of shelves in my new apartment for He-Man and Friends. One shelf for the good guys and one shelf for the bad guys. By the mid-2000s, I began collecting DC superheroes by Mattel, a line of 6-inch figures that focused on Superman, Batman, and their world of related characters. These are great. Not much articulation, but they look real cool. A year or two later, DC Comics answered my prayers when they released a line called DC Universe Classics. Great character selection. D-listers in the same wave as A-listers, it was nuts. Out of nowhere, the Marvel Legends line gets canceled in 2006, or so I thought. But it was soon under new management. Hasbro announced they bought out TOYZee and are taking over the Marvel action figure license. It wasn't until the following year, in 2007, that Hasbro premiered their new Marvel Legends line, with some hits and a few or more misses to follow. For the most part, over the last few years, the figures have improved tenfold, albeit a few paint app issues, and Hasbro has been spitting out figures consistently every few months or so for the last 17 years. That's crazy, right? The Marvel Legends line by Hasbro makes up a big chunk of my entire collection. Over the next few years, my collection grew and grew and grew. Then it grew some more. After 7 years and amassing a sick display, in 2010, I moved out of my first apartment. I carefully packed my figures into a few boxes, moved out of my sweet bachelor pad, and in with my lady. She was cool with my bringing boxes of figures to store in our place. What a catch. Over the next few years, my collection grew and grew and grew. Then it grew some more. I had the bright idea to turn one of the rooms in our apartment into my toy room. I got right to work. I began putting figures on shelves faster than I was putting up shelves. I was on a roll. I even started a DC and Marvel mural on the wall in this room. Future video on that. It was starting to feel like the good old days. My display was slowly coming together, and it was going to be bigger and badder than ever. Then, we got some wonderful toy room crushing news. Shelves came down as quickly as they'd gone up. Figures went back in the box, and I thought it'd be a smart move to get a storage unit this time around. In 10 years, I've had 4 different storage units. I won't get into it, but those things can be expensive, man! The things we do for our toys. These days, I am still collecting figures full throttle. I collect toys of cartoons, movies, comics, TV, all special to me at some point since childhood. There's so many different lines that make up my collection, from Marvel Legends to Garbage Pail Kids to the Muppets and so much more. I've been collecting action figures for 22 years and counting. The goal is to display my entire collection someday. I may keep all my stuff carded now, but I can't wait to open everything Tasmanian Devil style. Having this hobby means that I have a great family, and their support is everything. Thanks for watching. TOYZee out!